Hey, Richard Myers here. Hey, thank you for joining me. I want to do a brief video this morning, and for most of you, it's not going to make sense. I understand that. And so this is probably a video for 2 or 3 of the people that have read this book. This is a book by Brainard, Apostasia, and he's written an entire book trying to make the case that apostasia means rebellion rather than departure in Second Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 3. And so it's going to be about this book. So if you haven't read this book, I'm not saying that you should. In fact, it's probably not worth your time, to be honest with you, and I'll explain why that's the case. But those of you that I know, there's a couple of you out there who have looked at this book, and I want to explain why he fails in his objective. And so anyway, that's my point in this video, and it's for a couple of you who've looked at this book or may have the book. And so that's what this video is all about today. Now, let me read, just so that we kind of get our feet under us, Second Thessalonians chapter 2, and starting in verse 1. Paul writes, "Now we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him." So there's a direct statement in verse 1 that this is about our departure, our gathering together to meet him. He says that you may not be quickly shaken from your composure or be disturbed either by a spirit or a message or a letter as from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. So there was confusion. And let me just drop down to verse 5. "Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things?" And so Paul is talking about, he's relating to something that he had talked about with them at length, in detail, as we know, of course, from First Thessalonians, and now in Second Thessalonians. It's all about our departure to meet the Lord in the air, and the upper room discourse in John 14 and so forth. Now, he says in verse 3, and this is our verse, "Let no one in any way deceive you, for it," that is the day of the Lord, the time of tribulation, of the wrath of God being poured out upon the earth, "for it will not come unless and then we have this word in Greek, apostasia, comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction." And so the translation of this verse has always been one of rebellion, unless the rebellion comes first. And so this is an incorrect translation of this word, and it's created confusion and allowed for people who would suggest that the departure of the church would take place in the middle of the tribulation or at the end of the tribulation or not at all. And so it's led to confusion. But Paul says, I don't want you to be quickly shaken from your composure. And so you have to take this context in. And so Paul has talked about our departure, the transition, being caught up to meet the Lord in the air. The Lord is not coming back to the earth. We're going to meet him in the air. And so in First Thessalonians he talks about it, and I won't go. You can read that. And then in Second Thessalonians we have these verses. And so the question is, how do you translate apostasia in the Greek? And the confusion comes in that it's come over into the English language as apostasy, which means a spiritual departure. But the word, I would contend, can mean either a physical departure or a spiritual departure, depending on the context. And so it's been translated in all of your translations as a spiritual departure, i.e. a rebellion. But in fact, the correct translation is a physical departure. And so he's making a direct statement. Do not be deceived. The Lord, the day of the Lord will not come unless the departure, it's the definite article, the departure comes first. And so it's a direct statement of a pre-tribulational rapture. And so that's been proposed by many scholars, I might add. And so Brainard, Lee is, by the way, a Greek scholar, and I would suppose he's a guy that lives out in Montana. He's a nice guy by all accounts, and he is by all estimates and by his credentials a Greek scholar. So okay, so that's the setting of what I want to deal with. So the question is, so he then writes 300 pages. This book is 300 pages on that one word, apostasia. Now the book is only 80 pages. The rest of the book, almost 3/4 of the book, are footnotes and references, and throughout the Greek use of the Greek language from 200 BC to 500 AD in classical Greek and so forth. So he's got all of these references, and by his attempt here, he said he's covered every reference in existence for the word, the Greek word apostasia. And so that gives you an idea of what his book is about. So he does explain. Now, let me start out by saying, have you ever been involved in debate? There's debate teams, there are debate classes in high school and college. Now, debate is set up to determine the skill, knowledge, and ability of the debaters, not the truth of the proposition that they're debating. That is not determined by it. In other words, now the audience or the judges, when a debate is over, they're asked, who do you think won? Now, so somebody could debate an issue and win the debate by using the debate tactics, just like you might in a courtroom where a lawyer might win the argument for the jury. But the question of, is this truth? Does a debate determine, an outcome determine truth? And I would say categorically no. Just because somebody wins a debate, it does not mean that the proposition that they took they took one side or the other was true and in fact correct. In fact, in the debate arena, the debaters are required to take either side of the debate. And so it doesn't matter whether they're on the side of truth or the side of error. That's irrelevant in a debate. It's that they're on either side, and they're going to see who's going to win in the terms of their intellectual ability, their skills in their debating skills. And so what this is, if you look at it, is Brainard in a debate. And so he's using some of the techniques that's used in debating to win an argument. And so that's my first point in saying, okay, the book is the attitude, the spirit of the book is one of debate. And I'm saying that is not how you determine the truth of a matter. The second thing is he appeals to the church fathers. In other words, he even says that somebody in the first century would know more than us. And I have made a YouTube video saying that's just not true. We have, in the last 10 years, we have so much information, far more information than they would ever have. And I even mentioned the idea of a library and the importance of a library if you're going to have a university grant a PhD. Well, we have all the libraries nearly of the entire human race online and in searchable databases. And so we have so much more now than the church fathers could have ever had. And they were compromised. And I went into that in another video. And so first of all, the argument, it's again a debating device. He's arguing that because somebody in the first century said, may have said or may have indicated this, then it carries more weight than our opinion today. I categorically say that's just not true, and you can logically prove that it's not true. And I've done that in another video. The second thing that he does is he says that the word apostasia has never been used as departure. Now here we have an interesting situation. The noun that's used there, apostasia, only appears twice in the New Testament. So we don't have a broad spectrum of usage. And so what people have done is take the cognate, i.e. a verbal form of it. Now the verbal form appears in 15 times, I think, and is used for the majority of those times as a physical departure of some kind, or departure in general, either spiritual or physical. And so the point in using the cognate is to determine that the word can mean departure. And so Lee, and again using a debate technique, he says, well, you didn't know about the cognate fallacy. And I laughed when I saw that. I said, oh boy, what's the cognate fallacy? Well, who knows what the cognate fallacy is? He's saying that in certain circumstance, what's a cognate, first of all? Well, you can take a noun and turn it into a verb. And the verb would be a cognate of the noun. And so, and this is very common in language, words serve as nouns, verbs, and adjectives, and they would be cognates. The word actually means of the same blood, or in the same family. That's kind of the root, if you were, the cognate of the word, cognate, is of the same blood. Now, a cognate fallacy simply means that, and we all know that. Now, you have to take the usage of a specific word. You can't make the derivative, the etymology of the word determinative. Well, we all know that. I mean, but he uses the word cognate fallacy to cloud the issue and to win the debate. And so I laughed when I saw that. He's trying to snow us with his intellectual ability, and then the other thing is he has more than 3/4 of the book as Greek references. Now I don't know about you, but 99.9% of the people who read this book are not going to go back and look up the reference in the Septuagint or in the classical Greek literature or whatever it is. And so we're then having to take his word for the fact that he says in none of these instances is the word apostasia used as departure, which is, he declares that. And so I would say, well, I'd have to go back and look over the 300, 400, 500 references that you have in more than 200 pages to ascertain whether or not you assert in your debate that is actually true. And so, and here's what I would say. Okay, how about my experts? Now, this is another kind of debate tactic. I have better experts than your experts. And this is done in the courtroom all the time. And I don't like that either, because who knows what an expert knows, right? But many experts, and I would just mention one because he was at seminary when I was there, and that's Wayne House. And I'll tell you, Wayne is a certified expert in Greek language. The guy is very smart, and he is a Greek scholar. And Wayne holds to the same position that I do, that the word here should be translated departure, and that the indication is it's a physical departure, not a spiritual departure, as in rebellion. And I can mention other scholars, so-called, that hold to this position. So Lee again makes assertions which in a way he kind of fogs, he's trying to overwhelm you with his intellect. And that's again a debate tactic. And so I want to say that even though he's printed the entire book, I'm sorry he wasted all that time, he really fails to make the case. Now here's the coup de grace from me. There's two things here that determine the meaning of this word. First of all, it is the context. And I just read you just the context of the sentences around it. Now regarding our gathering together with the Lord and his coming to take us, to pick us up. That's the context. And if you look at the broader context of Second Thessalonians and First Thessalonians, the broader context is our departure in rapture. And so context is everything as far as the meaning of a word. Sometimes I might make up a word because I don't have an adequate word to express what I'm talking about, but then I develop a context around that word that gives you the meaning that I intended. And so Paul, even though this word is not used except one other time, he used it here, and there's indication that it is the word he used when he was discussing all of these issues with the Thessalonian believers when he was there in person. And the reason I know that is because of the definite article. It is not a departure, it is the departure. And so now here I think Lee Brainard embarrasses himself a little bit. He kind of goes, again, because the definite article is really, you can't just dismiss it. It's there. And it is determinative. In other words, the definite article in the simplest sense has the same meaning in Greek as it does in English. It is a grammatical fact that the definite article talks about something previously discussed. It is something that we know that the recipients of this communication would know instantly what you're talking about. And if that's not the case, then you're just being obscure and you're not communicating clearly. And so there's no indication, none whatsoever, that Paul had talked about a rebellion or a falling away in the context of the Thessalonians and the preaching and teaching that Paul gave them when he first opened the church and people came to Christ as Savior there. And so we have no indication whatsoever. In fact, the first mention of tribulation, not of the tribulation, but of tribulation, was 10 years later when Paul wrote to Timothy, a full 10 years after this letter to the Thessalonian believers. So there's no contextual basis to support the definite article talking about a rebellion. And so the definite article and the context determines the meaning of this word, and it must be the departure, our departure. And therefore every year I celebrate our departure, our pending departure, which is now my label for what we have previously called the rapture. And this is our pending departure. So I wanted to relate to, I know that some of you read this book, and it's if you want a challenge to read it, you can. If you understand Greek and you consider yourself a Greek scholar, you could read it. But I would challenge you to deal with a definite article, which in the book he talks about the definite article. He doesn't avoid it, but if you read it, he's obscuring the point. The definite article is a definite reference back to something that had previously been identified to the Thessalonian believers. Okay, I'm going to quit there. This is under my new regime of camera and my new computer, and so I'm hoping I can make this thing work for you, and I hope that the audio came through. And so, hey, I love you. And this, again, if you're not on board on what I'm talking about, just dump this video. Don't worry about it. It's a little bit specific. Thanks you so much for your attention. I appreciate it.